Season 2 of Netflix's surprise breakout hit, The Umbrella Academy, is out. And contrary to what some folks say, I don't feel it's necessarily that woke. I just think it's okay. Nothing special, really, to be honest. Season 2 opens with the bulk of our main cast being transported back into time, following Five's attempt to save his family once Vanya releases her powers and destroys the moon at the end of the first season. And of course, it takes him back into time right after the Kennedy assassination. That's really the bulk of the series where it takes place. What happens is basically they jump through time, and the group, all of the children, adults now in this case, are all separated, with Tom Hooper's character, Ellen Page's character, Klaus, and the other ones. They all end up at a different point in time and have to kind of live in the 60s on their own, by themselves. And they each kind of meet various players who were big at the time. For example, Luther ends up running into and working for Jack Ruby, with several of the other characters. Allison ends up meeting up with a civil rights leader and kind of helping promote some of that in Dallas, Texas during that time. With Five end up bouncing back, and then he runs into Hazel, Cameron Britt's character from the first season, who kind of warns him and says, "You've got to save the world, Five, and it's all going to be on you," before kind of sacrificing himself. And then it really kind of takes off to where there's 10 episodes in the series, and each episode kind of focuses a little bit on each of the main characters and when they came back and kind of what played out for them and where they were able to go from there. Five ends up seeing a guy who sets up a camera system and is spying on him once he arrives in the appropriate time, with approximately 10 days or so to stop the apocalypse that's still going to occur. And what happens is, he goes and makes friends with him, then ends up trying to track down his brothers and sisters and bring them all back together so they can save the world from the apocalypse. I didn't really feel that a lot of the characters had a lot better development in this season. I felt like it was just kind of where the characters were left off, and then they kind of threw them out. Specifically, Vanya's issues. She now has no memory of any of the events that happened in the first season, and she's put on a farm, ends up falling in love with the housewife, who's in an abusive relationship. So there's some development there, but it's almost like she was given a blank slate. She never has to actually deal with the fact that she was ultimately the cause of the apocalypse, and part of some of the reasoning why her father had treated her the way he did was because she was so powerful and couldn't control her power. And you see that at the end of the first season. When she was a kid, she killed several nannies, so that's the reason he felt he had to keep her medicated. But it's not like they learned from this. It's kind of just they wiped the slate clean, let her start over. And again, Luther's supposed to be, realizing that he should be the leader. He should put all of his fears behind him, and he's back where he started. He has to go through the same development again. It doesn't really learn anything. And even number 5 was kind of neutered in this one. Like, you show that he's gaining more control over his ability to jump, and even they start off with one instance where he meets his father in the past and talks to him about time jumping, saying he can't do it. I need to go back in the past, or I need to go in the future. And his father makes the comment to him, "Why don't you just practice on a few seconds? A few seconds can change anything." Five kind of scoffs at it, "A few seconds," which, based on Five's character from the first season, this is things that he would have thought about. He would have instantly started training and practicing on being able to get these few seconds. And this happens in like the 3rd or 4th episode, maybe 5th, and then it doesn't come back up again until the last episode, when obviously Five needs to do his time jumping and try to jump back a little bit at a time to twist it and be able to help or save people. And the problem with the series, for me, the biggest problem, is that the bulk of the episodes in the middle, the first 2-3 episodes are pretty decent. Again, because the characters were all dropped back in the past. Obviously, Allison's a black woman. She's put in the past in Dallas in like 1960, 61. So she's got to fend for herself for 2 years before the rest of her family, or Five, shows up specifically and can go out there and try to find her. So you don't really see the hate that she had experienced and things like that. They just kind of left it out there and kind of alluded to it a little bit, but it didn't really develop her character as much as she could, because she is someone that has the gift of gab in essence, and anything she says she can get people to do. So it shows her kind of not using this ability, even though after she was wounded, she heals, but she still is afraid to use it. and it just doesn't develop her character very well. Klaus becomes like this Jim Jones kind of character running around creating a cult, and it's kind of cutesy and kind of cliche, but it doesn't really go anywhere, and he spends most of his time trying to escape the people in this cult, and you get kind of brief flashes of why he developed it, but you don't really see much. And then they have him trying to run in and meet up with his the person he fell in love with back in Vietnam in the first season when he was thrown back into time, and there's kind of a little bit of event that triggers out with him. And another thing that bothered me is they understand the concept of not changing the timelines. Maybe not Diego as much because he's more of just the fighter, but Five understands. He tells them, and Vanya and Allison should understand because they seem to be smarter ones, but they don't. So everyone is out there messing with the timeline and completely changing the actions or events that are going to come from or progress from their actions at this timeline, and it never seems to pose a problem. And that's one of those things where, because Diego throughout the entire time, he ends up in a mental institution because he's trying to save Kennedy. He firmly believes he could save Kennedy, stop the assassination, and the world would be better. But just even that action would cause a reverberation to be so great and events to be altered, which is kind of what it shows. Because when Five first jumps back, you see like this war that's going on, and Diego's like, "Five, you sick son of a bitch, where have you been? We're waiting on you." And you see that what happened was he prevented the Kennedy assassination. Kennedy ended up nuking the Russians because of the Bay of Pigs and everything that went down in Cuba, and led to basically, a nuclear holocaust with Vanya having to use her own power and fighting, and the world blows up. But like I said, it goes pretty good in the first 3-4 episodes. Like 5, 6, and 7 are really just filler episodes that are just put in with little grains or kernels here and there. And then the last few episodes, you find out that the chick that Diego escaped with is actually possibly one of the children that Mr. Hargraves originally went and looked at or wasn't able to find when all the children were born from this mysterious event. And she's a mimic in essence, and she's able to mimic all of the other kids as their adults' abilities. And it leads to kind of a final interesting battle with her and then the handler in the first season that got shot in the head. She's still alive. She's just as evil as before. She has a complete vendetta against both Five and the actual commission, the Time Commission, and all of the actions are kind of leading up to this battle to where the commission shows up, several hundred, 1,000 strong, and tries to take on the Hargraves children. And it all works out without really anything bad happening to our main stars, our family unit here. But again, they didn't really understand the concept of altering the timeline. They speak to their father, show them all of their abilities. So of course, their father's a very smart man, so he's going to look at it and be like, maybe I shouldn't pick these kids in the future. And guess what happens? Boom. They end up jumping through time at the end of the season, showing up at what would be their home. They walk in, they see their father. He's still alive. Pongo is not there, and there's new kids there. And the father, Hargraves, says this is the Sparrow Academy. So it sets up an additional season. I haven't really read the graphic novels or anything like that, or the comics, so I don't really know anything about the storyline other than what the show has shown. And it just didn't work for me. It was one of those ones that if you like it, you'll at least have some appreciation for this series, but you won't necessarily like a lot of what they did with the characters, because you'll want more of the Klaus kind of absent-minded hippie. He's a psychic, so he can commune with the dead and feel all of this, either bad energy or good energy there, and use it to help him here and there, use the spirits to help him be able to do this and that. He has one instance where he falls and he has some spirits, some cowboys catch him, and you want to see more of that. You want to see more of Five trying to finally get a handle on his abilities and use them correctly, but you don't get to see it. Like I said earlier, he was pretty much kind of neutered in this one, and they even make a little joke about him having to meet himself, where it causes all these issues, and one of them is excessive sweating, irritation, itching, and like flatulence. So it's a little bit jokey thrown in there, but it kind of missed the mark with me on that one. I like the series okay. Like I said, if you like the first one, you'll definitely like this one in some amount. You may not like it as much because to me it's just not as good. In the first one, they had a better pacing throughout the series, throughout the 10 episodes, rather than in this one, the pacing was really good the first few, and then just dropped off before finally picking up and being okay at the end. Though the last battle in it was kind of anticlimactic, along with, again, some of the other actions they did through these episodes clearly alter the timeline, and they're just oblivious to it. All the stuff they're doing here, and they even talk about it, like, we don't need to alter the timeline. 5 tells them multiple times, we don't need to alter the timeline. And yet they all do it, and they all kind of are oblivious to the fact that they're doing it. And it just didn't work that well for me. Like I said, if you like the first season, I think you'll like this one at least a little bit. It's definitely, right now with everything going on, it's definitely worth sitting down and watch, because it is kind of funny. It's a little bit more adult humor than your typical superhero show, and it kind of takes a spin on it, and it makes the superheroes out to be, they're not overpowered bad guys. They're not like in The Boys, where they're just nasty and assholes because they have all this ability. They're just a bunch of kids with daddy issues, mama and daddy issues, that are all fighting for the love of the parent over each other, and they can never come together as a cohesive unit. So it gives a little bit of something to watch, but you kind of are wanting more by the end of it, and it's one of those ones that it doesn't necessarily make me hopeful for the next season, even though it is going to bring into some more conflict. But it's almost like everything that was done in this episode is like, oh, well, let's just kind of feed into it, and then we can get the big season next time, where we actually twist everything, where we reveal some of the truth about Reginald Hargraves and what actually is going on with him. You get a little teaser of who his true identity or what his true motivations are, when he deals with like a shadow council that he's part of that may be planning the JFK assassination. But like I said, it's an okay series. It's definitely one of Netflix's better creations over the past couple of years, and I would say give it a watch if you got the time. You might not be as excited, but I don't think you'll be overly disappointed. Other than that, thank you. Feel free to like, subscribe, share, and have a good day.